U.S. prosecutors have opened a criminal probe into Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell. The Department of Justice says it's investigating statements Powell made to Congress and whether he lied on the scope of renovating Federal Reserve buildings. The Fed chair has called the new threat a pretext to pile pressure in a dispute with the Trump administration over lowering interest rates. Listen.
The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president. This is about whether the Fed will be able to continue to set interest rates based on evidence and economic conditions, or whether instead monetary policy will be directed by political pressure or intimidation.
Eric Ham is a political analyst and the author of the book, The GOP Civil War, Inside the Battle for the Soul of the Republican Party, and he joins us now from Washington, D.C. So, Eric, look, you heard Jerome Powell sounding the alarm in some ways about the future independence of the Federal Reserve. Do you agree with him?
He's right. We are now seeing a criminal investigation by the Federal Reserve Chairman, which actually should have been underway already by the Inspector General's office of the U.S. Federal Reserve. In addition to that, Congress could have easily weighed in with hearings. But again, what we're seeing from the president is another attempt. This is a second bite at the apple of the president now trying to influence the independence of the board by removing the chairman itself. We already saw this happen with another Federal Reserve board member, Lisa Cook. And once again, we're seeing now the president weaponizing the Justice Department to go after not only his enemies, but also go after members of the government in an effort to try to reshape the government in a way that he believes it should run, which is also anathema, particularly to not only the independence of the Fed, but more importantly, the global and domestic impact of monetary policy.
And I want to ask you about that in a moment, but what I think is remarkable here is that Jerome Powell is on his way out. His term expires in May of this year. So given the timing of this, are you surprised?
Very much so, because again, not only are we talking about the impact of the independence of the Fed, and global investors are watching this. And one of the reasons for the attractiveness of the U.S. dollar has always been the independence of the board to be able to set interest rates. And now, given the fact that we're talking the Fed chairman, who, of course, President Trump has wanted out since he was inaugurated, and to make such a move at this time when our sources have already told us that the president has already his successor and ready to move once, in fact, he leaves. I think what this speaks to, once again, is how the president is willing to use a very heavy hand to go after enemies, both real and perceived.
Look, the U.S. has the privilege of being the global reserve currency. What do you think the economic implications of this will be? How do you think that investors from around the world will view this?
Well, we're already beginning to see how it's playing out. In fact, right now, we're seeing that the value of the dollar has already fallen 0.3% since this announcement was made. And I suspect that it will continue to do so. Already, the growing political polarization of the United States has made the U.S. Seem a very shaky bet around the world. You look at military adventurism in Venezuela. Now, of course, Greenland looks like it, too, might have to deal with U.S. incursion. And here at home, you've got the president, again, shaking up the monetary policy, not only of the nation, but of the entire world. And right now, many are watching and they are making bets, not in a good way for the United States as a result.
Yeah, and President Trump has made no secret, Eric, about his desire for Jerome Powell and the Fed to lower interest rates much faster than they have already. There's already been 3 reductions in the interest rate in 2025, but obviously the president wanted the Fed to go much further, much faster. But I want to play a piece of video for our viewers just to illustrate perhaps some of the personal animosity between these two men. This was when Trump and Powell were touring the renovations of the Federal Reserve building, and there was some discussion about the costs of the whole project. So I want you to take a look and pay close attention, especially to the body language. Watch.
It looks like it's about $3.1 billion. It went up a little bit, or a lot. So the 2.7 is now 3.1.
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, it just came out.
Yeah, I don't. I haven't heard that from anybody at the Fed.
Yeah, it just came out.
So, look, Powell there was disagreeing with Trump's numbers, saying that there was another building included. But the reason that we play that is just to illustrate the relationship between the two men. How much do you think that played into what we're seeing here from the Department of Justice?
Not so much that particular interaction, but the fact that Powell operated in a way that was completely independent from the president. Donald Trump now is surrounded by sycophants and yes men, and he is a president who has adored both loyalty and people who tell him what he wants to hear. But if you look at the idea of the building renovations, if in fact that was an issue, how is it any different than what we're seeing at the White House with the complete demolition of the West Wing, which of course no one actually knew about. The president certainly did not announce, and we only found out about it through an inadvertent video on Fox News that showed demolition vehicles in process taking place to destroy it. Now the president has torn it down. He has expand and his plans to expand it even bigger than the White House itself, but doing this without congressional approval. No one knows, in fact, where the money is coming from, though he says that companies are going to pay for it. But nevertheless, it's, again, no different than what the president is now accusing the Fed chairman of actually doing. And the Fed chairman, in light of these comments by the president, actually asked and called for an investigation by the inspector general. The inspector general, I might add, which is one of the few remaining independent entities within a federal agency that is independent of the Fed and can actually investigate criminal wrongdoing. So this is already taking place. But once again, I think what we're seeing here is a president who is operating imperialistically, not democratically.
And look, there's going to be obviously lots of questions, Erica, about the impartiality of the next Federal Reserve chairman after Jerome Powell departs. But I want to quickly, if you can just briefly comment on this, Republican Senator Tom Tillis, who is on the Senate Banking Committee, said that he would oppose the confirmation of a replacement until this whole legal matter around Jerome Powell is resolved. So what do you think happens next? How will this impact the process?
That's a very strong statement. And in fact, if he could get additional Republican senators that would actually be willing to rebuke the president on such a powerful move, that would actually send shivers, I think, through the White House to make clear that they don't have carte blanche from what was at one time an independent branch of government, the U.S. Congress.
All right, Eric Ham, we really appreciate your analysis on what is a very complicated topic. And of course, we'll be watching it. Appreciate your time, sir. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Don't miss out. Get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news, expert insight. Like, share, stay ahead.